Welcome to My Life, Chassidus Applied, episode 22, a special Rebbe edition. Being that Gimmel Tammuz is right upon us, 20 years of this sad and complicated day. So we decided to dedicate this entire episode to the Rebbe, Gimmel Tammuz, and the many questions that have come in regarding the Rebbe, regarding our role today, 20 years, what is this day about, what should we be doing, and so on. So above all, I want to just begin by saying, literally, many questions have come in. So I think a good introduction is to remember one of the cardinal rules of Chassidus in general, Torah overall, and particularly the Rebbe's approach, which is all in the same spirit. Einim mevakesh el lefikeichon. The Rebbe emphasized this hundreds, if not thousands of times. We are not asked to do something that we don't have the power to do. God would never do something so cruel as to give somebody a challenge. Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba betrunya in B'riyosov, to give someone a challenge that they cannot overcome. It would be like sending someone on a mission and saying, here, go, and you know that that person can't accomplish it. It's pashut achzaris, it's cruelty. So whatever our challenge may be, and we all have many challenges, and including this big Gimmel Tammuz question and challenge, we have to always remember that we have, for every challenge, we have a pekel, a bag, a pile of faculties, resources, and skills to deal with any particular challenge. This is a cardinal, fundamental rule that the Rebbe established, and that he said many times to people, even in the most difficult situations. And the Jewish people are, of course, a testimony to this. We've seen the abyss many times, in the darkest possible ways. And as in direct proportion, as much as they were oppressed, they thrived and they spread and they grew and they flourished. So the same thing can be applied to Gimmel Tammuz as an overall statement that there's no such thing as impossible, there's no such thing as we can't do it, there's no such thing as room for negative energy, even though we have these questions. So let me begin with some of the questions that have been asked and try to address it topic by topic. But I want to begin from the klal to the prat. We all, as I said, have moments of weakness. The key here is to get strength to be able to deal with any particular challenge. Chassidus talks about the tzimtzum harishin. In Ruach Meishlim is a Maimer Tafris Tzadik Aleph, Sefer Maimorim Kuntreisim, where the Friedrich Rebbe talks about the tzimtzum harishin, that and many other places, that it's hepech hakavona, hepech harotzen. Even though God Himself created the tzimtzum is a concealment of the divine presence. Nevertheless, it's not what He wants. So you could ask, 1 second, how is that possible? He should do something that He didn't want. Yes, because there's a kavana. The tzimtzum is b'shvil hagilui. The whole purpose of the tzimtzum, the whole purpose of the darkness, of the concealment, is in order to bring revelation. So you can't say that He wants it as an end in itself. Yes, He wants it, but not as an end in itself. As an end in itself, it's hepech harotzen. It's not the intention. It would be like someone breaks down a building, raises a building with a Z, in order to build a bigger building in its place. You will never say that raising the building is the kavan, that's the purpose. It's not, the tzimtzum is not a kavanah la'atzmei. In other words, it's hepech harotzen, hepech kavanah. It's not the intention is to raise the building. The intention is to build another building in its place. To do so, for whatever reason, you need to raise and destroy the building before it. Similarly, seisra manas livnes, when we talk about something that you destroy in order to build, the tzimtzum is b'shvil hagili. So however you understand Gimmel Tammuz, is definitely a form of concealment. And we would all preferred not to have it all together. It's a form of concealment. But its intention is to reveal something deeper. So we may never understand why it has happened, why the Rebbe had to be taken in a physical way, why for 2 years, almost a little more than 2 years, from Chov Zayin Oder till Gimmel Tammuz, the Rebbe was in that situation. We'll never understand that. But there's no way to say that's an end in itself. That's the bottom line. You must say that it's b'shvil hagili, and in order to bring even a bigger gili, even bigger revelation. Just like the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which is kemisas tzadikim, like the Rebbe brings at the end of the Maimer Bas Legani, But Friedrich Rebbe, Yud Shvat, is like Seifas Beis HaLekeinu, like the burning of the Beis HaMikdash. you cannot say, God forbid, that it is an end in itself. You have to say it brings some type of great revelation. The destruction of the first two temples is in order to make room for the third temple, Migdash Adnei Keinu Yodecha, a third temple which will never be destroyed, as it's explained in many places. So one thing is for sure, no matter how we understand the day, and I'm sure there are many interpretations, I am not going to speculate something that we don't have direct words or direct explanations from the Rebbe or the Rabbeim, but for sure it cannot be an end in itself, and has to be bring to something greater, and it's up to us to bring that greatness out. So this is not an explanation, it's what we're supposed to do about it. As the Rebbe writes in different letters, Jews don't ask why, we ask what are we going to do? As frustrating as it may be, our question is what are we going to do? Because lie down and die, God forbid, is not an option. As I said before, we must say we have the strengths, and we must say that any concealment is only to bring a greater revelation. I say this as an introduction because it's critical to begin by speaking about Gimmel Tammuz in the general context. We also know that thousands of years ago, Gimmel Tammuz was a day when the sun was stopped. Shemesh begiven daim. The expression is that Yeshua said, pray to Hashem, Shemesh begiven, the Shemesh and given, during the war. He wanted the sun to continue shining so they can continue fighting, and the sun shouldn't set and shouldn't turn night, which makes it more difficult to fight the war. So he says, Shemesh be given, the sun in Given, in the land area called Given, Doim should be silent. As the commentaries explain, silent because the Shemesh, the sun, like other creatures and creations, sing a song of praise. And that's what creates the movement of the sun. It's like bowing in praise. Shechina b'mayriv, so the sun goes from Mizrach to Mayriv. Mizrach means actually the word Zorach HaShemesh, the lighting, the sunrise, and Mayriv means the Arav HaShemesh, the sun setting. So you have the idea of a sun who had to stop its praise and its movement by stopping the praise, by telling the sun to stop singing and stop bowing. Therefore, you have the situation where the sun actually physically stopped. So in many, many ways, we can compare that Gimmel Tammuz to ours. The sun, which is the Rebbe. Moshe is compared to a sun. The Moshe in each generation, in our sense, it was silenced. Silenced from our ears. Some Chassidim would say, when the Frierdiker Rebbe had a stroke, look how grob, look how chumnizdik, look how gross and crass the world is, that we can't hear the Rebbe's, we can't understand what the Rebbe is saying. So yes, on a deeper level, the Rebbe may be speaking far louder and far better than we can hear. But on our level, on our limited level, on our myopic vision, the sun was silenced. So in that sense, we have now a Gimmel Tammuz 20 years later, and we have to think about what are we supposed to do. Before I continue, I want to mention that there's an interesting note, which is the first revelation here in my life. You probably have not heard about it before. Recently, a new manuscript from the Mittler Rebbe was discovered, a whole new book, but one that's very relevant to our discussion here. So there's a famous Maimer Vayitzavim, Ve'era Tovkov Samaches from the Alter Rebbe, which later became part of the Tzemach Tzedek, published it in Eira Teira, and with his comments and so on. But the Maimer in Eira Teira, Ve'era, ends on page 166. It's volume 1, Shmois Ve'era Ve'era Teira. And it ends, you could see it's not finished idea. So now we have the end of the Maimer that I believe was never discovered beforehand. And directly connected to this, I'd like to read it in Hebrew and translate it because it's a new revelation. Here's actually a photocopy of the actual Ksav Yad of the Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe. So what we have where the Eira Teira ends on page 166, he says the following. He says that after speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu and Va'era and the revelation of Moshe Rabbeinu, that the Maimer continues and says, and I'm reading now directly from here, he says the following. Ubezeh Yuvan, after he explains how Moshe is a mashpia, a Rebbe, a mashpia, a neshama klolis that transmits to entire generation, he says, Ubezeh Yuvan, ma shenimtze bedivrei Razal, the Moshe Leimes. With this we'll understand what it means that Moshe Leimes, that Moshe did not die, As it says in Zohar, on the pasuk, La Yoda Ish, that no man knew his grave. So the Zohar explains, what does it mean? They didn't know his grave, because in a way, Moshe did not have a grave. Did not die. And that's where the Maimer stops in Ve'era Teda Ve'era. But here the Mittler Rebbe continues. Listen to this. He says the following. V'hainu. And I apologize because it's very small letters here, so please bear with me. Sha'omru dispashtusa de Meishe b'chol dora eich mashanemer by vayigva vayesaf. So he's talking about that there's a Moshe in every generation, and it says vayigva vayesaf, which is a term used that doesn't say the word death. It says the word vayigva vayesaf, like by Yaakov Avinu, that he prepared himself, that he gathered all his faculties and so on. They all came together. But it doesn't say the actual word. So he says, Asifazu eina bechinas Asifa v'istalkus legamri chaz v'shalom. You cannot say that this is a complete type of removal, God forbid. You can't say such a thing. Why? Efsher. Just like you can't say that there's no sun on earth that's lighting the earth, you can't say this is missing. Why? Because the teacher, a mashpia, always needs to continue to give to his recipients. Moshe Rabbeinu Roya Neman, as a shepherd, has to continue giving. But the fact remains, however, that there is a thing called night. So the sun sets, he says, and nevertheless it continues to shine through the moon, the reflection of the moon. But to say that the sun disappears completely, God forbid. And this is how he explains what happened after Moshe Rabbeinu. I think it's extremely relevant. Because based on the Rebbe's principle, that our work is Aveda B'Keyach Asme, like the Levana, we are reflections of the Rebbe. The moon is a reflection of the Rebbe. A sun can never disappear. It can set, and you may not see it, like he says, Asifas Zrichas Hashemesh, so you see the sunset, but you don't see the sun direct sunlight, but you see it reflecting in the moonlight in each one of us. It's essentially what he says here. I'm sure this will be published at some point, but it's fascinating because he literally discusses the topic that's so relevant to our times. So to say, like we say, Yaakov Avinu Lei Mes, Ma Zayir B'chaim, Afu B'chaim, just like his children are alive, so too he. We are the reflection of that sun. So the sun continues to shine, but it shines in a reflective way through the moon. This means the night. So we're in a state of night. But to say, God forbid, no reflection, you can't say that because, like he says, a Moshe has to continue to transmit. Now, the relevance to us is very obvious. What are we going to do? And with that, let's read some questions that came in on this topic. And what does Gimmel Tammuz represent? What emotions should it conjure up? Different people ask, what is Gimmel Tammuz? How are we to understand this day? Okay. I believe I answered this question, but let me answer it now directly. Every one of us have our own feelings, and everyone is entitled to experience their relationship with the Rebbe as they experience it. But there are nevertheless certain principles that we must derive. What I mentioned before, number one, there's no such thing as a challenge that we cannot deal with. Number two, any concealment is only for a greater revelation. And number three, like we just said, that revelation continues to exist. But in this case, it's up to us, because we're the moon. So it's literally echoing the words of the Rebbe, Chof Ches Nissen, 23 years ago, where he said, Ich getan als, ist tut was kennt. In a tragic way, this was fulfilled with Chof Zayin Oder, when the Rebbe stopped speaking, stroke, and then Gimmel Tammuz, 2 years and a few months later, where the Rebbe physically is not in our presence. So we see that the Rebbe's words, in a tragic way, were fulfilled. And the Rebbe said 6 weeks before the stroke that when a Rebbe has a stroke, our job is to be his mouthpiece, his levana, basically. Exactly as the Rebbe writes in this Maimer in Va'era, Tovkuf Samaches, his hanocha of it. And what does that mean? That we have a responsibility, more responsibility in some ways than before Gimmel Tammuz. So of course, we'll soon address the 20-year issue. So what does Gimmel Tammuz represent? It represents a helam, a concealment that poses challenges, but at the same time, every concealment is meant to bring a gilui. But in this case, it's not just automatic. God should have mercy, and we should not wait for our efforts. But as long as We are here, and as long as the revelation is not here, the revelation of the divine, Moshiach, and so on, it's incumbent upon us not to lie down and die, not to be depressed and resigned, and not to say what's going to be. As the Rebbe says so often, we don't ask what's going to be, we ask what are we going to do. As the Rebbe told Rabbi Lau, when he used that term after the Yom Kippur War, I believe I've told the story here a number of times, but I'll share it again. When he came here in 1974, the first time from Israel, he was a Rav in Netanya, and the Rebbe asked him, what's the mood, what are they saying in Israel? Remember, after the 6-day war, there was euphoria. It was a short war. It was a miraculous one. Few casualties. They conquered Yerushalayim, Kesel, Harabayas, Sinai, the whole thing. It's euphoric moments. By contrast, after the Yom Kippur War, there was a demoralization. They were caught off guard, Israel. There was arrogance. It was on Yom Kippur. There were many casualties, over 2,000, which for a country like Israel was really horrible. Every casualty is horrible, but especially such a number. They rebounded, thank God, and won the war, but at a graver cost. So the mood, the Rebbe was asking Rabbi Lau, what's the mood? What are they saying? He says, Eden Zog, was wird sein? What's going to be? The way he tells the story is the Rebbe grabbed his wrist and said to him, Rav Lau, Eden fragen is was wird sein, fragt was geht man tun. Not ma yeh, man not ma yeh, man naseh. What are we going to do? Not what will be. That's the voice of a victim. Similar story I've also shared in a Shea convention. It was in Detroit, and they were coming back. There was a snowstorm. It was a Friday, couldn't get back. So the group wrote to the Rebbe about the snow. They're stuck in the snow. And the Rebbe did not like the word stuck. He said, you definitely spoke at the kinnus, and you all know about Ashgacha Pratis. And you tell me stuck? And what better sign from heaven is a snow from heaven? Snow is a sign from heaven. That means you haven't finished your shlichus there yet. That's why you're still there. When you finish your shlichus, you'll be able to come home. And the Rebbe said that means, literally, that either at the airport, or on the way to the airport, or back in the city, you have to continue your activities of spreading Yiddishkeit and Chassidus. And when you finish that, that will be a sign that you can come back home. On Sunday, that's exactly what they do. And on Sunday, the snow, they were able to come back. And the Rebbe answered, yes, now is the time because you finished the shlichus. The Rebbe told me a similar thing when my father was in the hospital, Layalenu, Tov Shenun, in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It was 1989, so he was in the hospital due to a stroke. And the Rebbe gave me lekach for him on Erev Yom Kippur, or before Yom Kippur. And then the Rebbe said to me with a smile, he said, Zog dem Taten, as it verendigt in the shlichus, dort wird man amaris lassen. So I came to the hospital, I told it to my father. My father did what he had to do. After Yom Kippur, Rabbi Chadikov came to see my father and said to him, the Rebbe wants to know whether you already finished your shlichus there, whether you finished your mission. So it wasn't just a nice line. This is the approach. This doesn't mean that, God forbid, that the hospital is a good thing to be at. But it means tzimtzum b'shvil hagilui. It means even when there's a concealment, the way we have to look at it, ala nizik kvar nigzar min hashamayim. The one that causes a problem, they're responsible, as we've discussed in previous episodes. But for those of us that have gone through a difficulty, you have to say it's for a deeper reason, and that we have the strength to deal with it. So what does Gimmel Tammuz represent? I do not know the deeper secrets why, but I do know that we are told that we have to do something about it, and that we could do something about it. That's what we should focus on, and not waste time in areas that we may never have answers for. What emotions should it conjure up? I am sure it's a combination of sadness, but not sadness that demoralizes and that paralyzes us, but a sadness that motivates us to do something about it. What to do? We shall soon talk more about that. Another question, what is the appropriate way to observe the day? I don't know if I could call it observing the day. I don't like the word observing the day. It is a day that we cannot ignore, but it's also a day, I don't know if it's observation, about observance, but it's rather something we need to do. Now, the Rebbe gave us a shlichus. He gave us a shlichus to spread Chassidus all over the world. He gave us a shlichus, as he said, his last shlichus was do whatever you can to bring Moshiach. It's now 20 years later. So we have to ask ourselves, what did we not do? To say we did everything, the results don't demonstrate that. As I said before, God should have mercy and we shouldn't have to do anything more, and Moshiach should come immediately. However, as long as that has not happened yet, we have to think differently. If you're going to do and speak and think everything you did till now, you're going to get the same results. So if we really want different results than what has happened in the last 20 years, we need to do something differently. We need to innovate. Using the Rebbe's words, we have to open our eyes, see the world through the lens of the Rebbe, see the geula possibilities in everything in life. In everything you do, what would it look like if Moshiach was here? What would your work look like? Your workplace, your home, the streets, your children, education, every area of life. Let's start envisioning what that area would look like. For this, Lilmid Inyan Gula Mashiach, you need to learn. How else are you going to know what that looks like? When we learn the halachas of Beis HaMikdash, let's say in the 9 days, 3 weeks, as the Rebbe encourages us to do, it says, Kol ha'esek b'teres ha'ela is ma'ila alav ha'kasav ki lehikra v'ela. Someone who studies the laws, it's as if they brought it. Why? Because the Torah is istakel. God is the blueprint. Istakel baraisa bara alma. God looks into the Torah with that which and through that He creates. The same thing as the mitzvahs in the Torah. Even those we can't perform, when we learn in the Torah, we begin to envision what it's like. So the same thing is learning in Yoni Gula Mashiach is like envisioning that world. It's not just a zgula to bring Mashiach. That itself helps us open our eyes and see things with a perspective that we perhaps don't always look at today. This is what we must begin doing on an ongoing basis. In designating classes in our workplaces, maybe 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes a week. The main thing is it should be consistent, ongoing. Having conversations about this at home with our children, with our families, making it a topic, actually giving incentives to our children. Children have a good imagination. What would the world look like when Mashiach comes? Beyond the fairy tale images of ice cream trees and so on. What will the streets look like? What will the birds look like? What will the sky look like? What will our homes look like? And the second thing is preparing our homes and preparing our own lives as if Mashiach is here. In Shavuos Tavshin Aleph, the Frierdiker Rebbe speaks and says that when a special guest is coming to visit you, weeks before you prepare your home, so that person the guest should feel welcome and warm in your home. The Frierdiker Rebbe continues, he says, in a few little while, a special guest is coming, his name is Moshiach. And we have to start preparing our homes and our lives for this guest. So imagine if the Rebbe came into your house, would he be comfortable? In your living room, in your dining room, in your bedrooms, in your other rooms? Would he be comfortable to stay there for a Shabbos, stay there for a day? This is how we begin to prepare. It may not be we're at that level, but at least you're envisioning it. Opening your eyes, you're looking at it in that type of fashion. And when you start looking at things that way, you start living that way. And when you start living that way, you're preparing the ground for it. Now imagine a groundswell would grow a grassroots effort where many people start seeing it through such eyes. What's possible? Not always what we are, but what's possible? What are we capable of? And that, when it becomes even one person can tip the scale. Imagine a critical mass. Imagine a community. Imagine a group of people. This is the way we should be thinking. If we really want to honor Gimmel Tammuz the proper way, we have to ask ourselves, the mandate the Rebbe left us. He left us a mandate. The mandate was that I've done everything I can, now you do what you can. And maybe 10 of you will be obstinate and figure out what to do and bring Mashiach. And then later he said 2-3 people will put their heads together and strategize. When the Rebbe speaks like that, even if it's hundreds or thousands of people, he's speaking to each one of us. So imagine you're in the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe is speaking to you in that tone. So if we're in business, would we leave any stone unturned if we were told that you can succeed and you have to do something? If 20 years passed and your business has stagnated and there's no progress, you would figure out everything possible to make that business grow. You wouldn't even wait 20 years. So we have to think of it. If it's simas lev, we care, and we don't point to someone else, someone else should do it. This is the way we begin acting. This is the way we take initiative. Each of us has to make the cheshbon nefesh, and we can't play pravish shifla shel sheker and say, who am I, what am I, let someone else do it. It's not the Rebbe's language. He didn't give it to one person. But even when he said 2-3, he didn't say which 2-3. So it could be any one of us. And we have to think of it that way. To say, I'm not going to do it because someone else will, it's completely also is antithetical to the Rebbe's approach. He means now you and meaning I mean him, I mean you. Means me, every one of us. must or should one go to the Ohel on Gimmel Tammuz? If yes, why? Another question, other than going to the Ohel, is there anything else I can do to feel close to the Rebbe? Okay. Must or should, must is not in my domain to tell people what they must do. It's clearly a custom that the Rebbe himself went to the Ohel of Frierdiker Rebbe. Many people don't want to make a distinction. But the concept of going to the Ohel is based not on our generation. It goes back to Ishtadchus al Kivri Tzadikim of Kolov visiting the Moras Machpelah. And throughout the generations, in many ways, the Ohel is a place where Tzaddik's neshama rests and it has a power to it. I know some people are uncomfortable to go, which is, I assume, part of this question. So I'm not telling you what you must do. You know, Ohel is a mysterious thing. It's like it's not pshat that those that go know exactly what's happening there. It's just that they go because it's a place where in some way we believe and we feel that there's a connection. I don't believe that you can't make a connection elsewhere. And again, I don't want to tread into areas that are beyond my scope. It's not like I understand exactly how souls travel. But the fact of the matter is, there are many ways to connect to the Rebbe, absolutely. The Ohel is definitely a serious way to do so. And this doesn't mean that you're acknowledging that Gimmel Tammuz is a negative day. You can go to the Ohel and acknowledge it not like a memory, but in some way God wanted the Rebbe's presence to be there for a period of time. However you interpret it. We said before, there's no real histalkus. There's the sun always continues to shine. It just shines like through the night, through the moon. So so that's not necessarily an acknowledgement of that. It's recognizing the power of Ishtadchus al Kivri Tzadikim. And the reason for it is, in Sfarim it talks about, because the neshama is there, we read in the minor lashon, all the levels of the soul, and there's a way to connect there. The Rebbe in Shlach Tovshin Yud spoke about the Ohel as being a place where you relate to the Rebbe in a very real way. It's not just in a very amorphous way. Here is where he is. That doesn't mean, again, that it's a negative thing. It means this is where, when we say he's now present more than even in his lifetime, so why at the Ohel? He's present everywhere. But in some reason, some way, that's the channel. If someone is uncomfortable with doing it, I am not here to tell you what you must do. I will say that there are other ways to connect. And above all, the way that the Rebbe says, Ishtadchus beruchnis. I mentioned this last week, and I'll mention it again from Shlach Tovshin Yud, from Moirei Naim, writes in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, that's through Limadat Teirah. You connect, the Rebbe's essence is in his Teirah. I'm not getting now into discussion, how is it different than his essence that's in the Ohel? I don't know if it says the essence is in the Ohel. The essence is in his Teirah. So sharing the Rebbe is by sharing his Teirah. We actually launched a campaign, which I must say has been beyond our expectations successful. You go to sharetherebbe.com. We made it easy to use Torah Meaning for Life, which is a book that, thank God, and I humbly acknowledge, I was part of the process of a book that has brought the teachings of the Rebbe themselves to thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. So we made at a nominal fee, a special personalized gift that you can send to anyone. So it's a very easy way. You know a doctor, you know a lawyer, you have friends, people who never heard of the Rebbe. Here's an easy way just to do it. Go to sharetherebbe.com, and it's a simple way to basically share. There are many other ways to do it. If you can share Lekutei Sichos and a Maimer, noch besser. But that may not be easy to do with everybody. So we made it easy in this way. But to go back to the theme here, yes, that is how we get close to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe speaks Ishtadchus begashmis, which is the physically going to the Ohel, and Ishtadchus beruchnis, which is the spiritual connection through learning the Rebbe's Torah. So as in preparation to Gimmel Tammuz, absolutely I recommend. Very simple. Every day we should learn a little piece of Maimer, a little Chassidus, a little Sicha, and from the Rebbe. Every person according to what he can. As I said many times, it's better 5 minutes a day than cramming it 5 hours in one shot. Kvias. Make it a presence, make it a habit, make it a pattern and a ritual in your life, which counteracts other rituals that are not necessarily such great habits. And a routine, good routines. And now's the time to do it. We're approaching it. There's 10 more days till Gimmel Tammuz. Every day we should have something, a share, a specific thing, something we share with our children before they go to sleep, when they wake up. Live with the Rebbe, share the Rebbe, but do it in new ways. Don't do it as by rote, and don't do it as a mechanical thing to be Yetzer. Do it with passion and love, because this is how the sunlight of the Rebbe radiates now through the moon that we are. So that's what I would answer those questions. How do I cope with the feeling of defeat and hopelessness that after 20 years Moshiach hasn't yet come? Okay, another question. If 20 years passed and no change, what are we supposed to expect now? Should we just be waiting for Moshiach, or should we be doing something else? Obviously, this approach is not working. Did the Rebbe know that 20 years after Gimmel Tammuz, Moshiach would still not be here? Was the Moshiach campaign a go for broke project? Did the Rebbe tell us Moshiach is almost here, so we'll try harder and hopefully bring him? Did the Rebbe consider the letdown and false hope that maybe even the years that 20 years after 3 Timmuz and Moshiach, not maybe that the years that 20 years and after Gimmel Tammuz and Moshiach is still not here? Another question. It's almost 20 years. This Golus is way too painful for me to handle. If the Rebbe was frustrated with Moshiach not coming, how can we possibly bring him? My children too are confused. They keep on telling them Moshiach is coming and he just doesn't come. Okay. Another similar question. The Rebbe spoke about Moshiach coming in his generation using the term prophecy. If, God forbid, Moshiach doesn't come soon, how are we to understand the Rebbe's words about the Geula being imminent? Okay. Well, I believe I answered many of these questions earlier in my previous introductions, but I'll be more specific since the question and try to address them directly. It's a very difficult thing to share, to talk about something that saddens us, at the same time to feel motivated to move forward. But we have no choice. Let's be honest. If you are committed to the Rebbe, as I've told many times the story with Shmuel Munkes, that other is a Rebbe, and then everything will be fine. And God forbid, if you're not, you deserve, and Shmuel Munkes told the Alter Rebbe, a bullet in your head for taking away the pleasure of Elam Hazar from so many Chassidim. We assume, and we have to assume, that we're talking here between us, people who believe that the Rebbe is a Nitzchi. A Rebbe is a Rebbe, Moshe Rabbeinu, sent by God. And nothing changed in the shlichus that he gave us in the Maimer Bas Lagani of the Deir HaShvi. Once you accept that axiom, it doesn't make a difference how many questions we have. We may have millions of questions. The Rebbe once said that Amunah is such a thing that a question doesn't weaken and an answer doesn't strengthen. So yes, we are Chabadniks, and yes, we want to use our minds and understand, but the first thing a smart mind understands is that there's some things that are not understandable. That's also part of intellect. In the simplest interpretation, it means the ultimate of knowing is to not know, is knowing that you don't know. Sometimes Chassidus goes further, it's knowing the unknowable. But even on the simplest interpretation, it's a push to think. Even in science, the more they learn, the more they discover how much more there is to know. The higher you climb the mountain, the broader are the horizons. So there's many mysteries. And it's very disconcerting because we don't like mysteries. We don't like, we're uncomfortable and restless when something isn't answered, fully understood. But there are many questions we may not have an answer to. We have to figure out how to forge ahead without letting the questions disturb us. You could ask the questions, and that's why we do. But to turn it into defeat and hopelessness and so on is not an acceptable approach from the Rebbe's perspective. And this is something we have to infuse our children with. We're at war. At war, there's no time for a soldier to say, hey, is it worth it? Is the war still being fought? There's no question the words of the Rebbe, Divrei Tzadikim Kayom La'ad, are eternal. The Rebbe didn't say things just because it was his opinion. He didn't say things, no, going for broke. The Rebbe said that the Birurim are finished and we're at the threshold. He meant it. And just to confirm that this is not a Chiddush, if the Rebbe had never mentioned Moshiach before Tavshin Nun, before Rebbe Tzach Chaim Mushka passed away, you could say, even then I wouldn't say it, but let's say Yetzer Hara could argue, oh, maybe the Rebbe is so-called going all broke. What's the expression there? A go for broke project. But the Rebbe began the first Maimer Bas Lagani, Tavshin Yud Aleph, long before all this. Now, why this is the Deir HaShvi, the seventh generation, last generation in Golos, the generation that will bring the Shechina down B'Poel Lamata, seventh generation from the Alter Rebbe. So it's all consistent. All the Rebbe's themes that followed, and all the growth and expansion of Chabad and Shlichus and Afotz and so on, is all the outgrowth of that statement, that declaration that was in 1950. 1951, Yud Shvat. So you cannot say that this is some type of, God forbid, last desperate attempt or something. Stab. People say this. I don't even want to repeat it. But since people say it, I want to absolutely negate the possibility. That's a Rebbe. A Rebbe is speaking. This is a Rebbe speaking what he heard. It's not something his own words or his own theories. And he sees a world coming to the destination of Moshiach. Simple as that. Moshiach is going to come based on Torah belief. At what point is it going to happen? And we're not talking here with the beginning of 6,000 years of Shittal Fashnin Havalma. We're talking here the end, which was already predicted. The year Tov Reish would be the explosion of higher Chachma, higher wisdom and lower wisdom. All the signs. This is long before the Rebbe. We have a discussion of Mashiach telling the Baal Shem Tov when he's going to come. The Rebbe was saying we're coming to the culmination. Let's not forget that. People talk about it as if the Rebbe came up in 1990, 91, Tov Shenun, and now the Rebbe started talking about Mashiach suddenly. He just intensified that which was always part of and parcel of Torah, a foundation in Torah. In 6-7 prayers of Shem Nesser we mention it. It accelerates, which is obvious. What do you think? We only get closer. We can't go further. So it's obvious, if you think about logically, that you get closer, the leader of the generation is going to talk about it as such. It's not. It actually wouldn't make sense if he didn't. If the Rebbe had not spoken about it in an intensified way, you'd start wondering, so what happened exactly? So it's very clear. And the Rebbe looked at the world. He saw Soviet Union collapse. That's the eyes of with the eyes of Geula. You see a Geula, a taste of what's coming. You see Jews going out of Russia and coming to Israel. You see a taste. You see the outburst of technology and the developments, another element of Achdus in the world. You see the humanitarian efforts of the nations of the world. You see the politicalization, democratization, and freedoms that reign. Another sign. The signs are there. We are Golus mentality people, so we see it with those eyes, with the narrow eyes. The Rebbe is trying to teach us to look with different eyes. So to start bringing our narrow eyes and imposing it on the Rebbe's position is not only inappropriate, it's a chutzpah, and just be even a simple person has to say, I don't see. But someone that does see, it would be like someone sitting in a valley and saying to someone who's standing on top of a mountain, he says, I see broad horizons, expansive horizons. You say, what are you talking about? There's a little anthill here. That's all I see. I'm a little world. The answer is, my friend, you're living in a little valley, in a little box. So you say you don't see it, fine. But to say someone else doesn't see it is a little arrogant, more than a little. A Rebbe is here standing on a mountain and seeing from the peak, seeing the whole bird's eye view. Just like Moshe Rabbeinu was shown Ad Hayema Achrin. Not just Ad Hayama Achrin. So till the end of times, it's a horizon, it's a landscape, it's a panorama of history. Machshava Gduma Da'ak, it says, Beskida Achas, in one glimpse, you see the whole picture. It's like a blueprint. So what's the surprise that the Rebbe of the Moshe generation, the son of the generation, sees the whole picture? And we have the merit and schus to hear it. So try to impose our narrow-mindedness or our materialistic way of thinking on the Rebbe's position is ridiculous. Gimmel Tammuz is meant to wake us up to that fact. So it's time to not try to fit the Rebbe into our box. It's time for us to try to fit into the Rebbe's out of the box. That's what the whole point is. Okay. How do I explain to my children why we don't have a physical Rebbe and how we connect with the Rebbe without seeing him? Interestingly, even though for us adults it seems strange that we can't connect our Rebbe physically, what do we do? Children think very differently. Children are spiritual creatures by nature, not evolved spiritually, but they are by instinct, they imagine, they dream. So the way we have to explain it is that a Rebbe, as I said, is sunlight. There was a time when the sun shines. There's a time when it's at night, and the sun shines through the moon. And we are today the moon. If this is something that can be explained, I am not saying it's a lot easier. You can just bring your child to the Rebbe physically, to dollars, or to yechidus, or to farbringen, or to simchas Torah, etc., for a blessing. But to say that the sun is not here, the sun is shining through us. So as he speaks in the Maim of the Mittler Rebbe that I mentioned before, the sun shines even when it's night. The sun is still shining on another part of the world. The moon is what reflects it to us in this part of the world where it's night. So that's how we have to explain it. That at night, the light doesn't go away. It's not total darkness. as I spoke before about the tzimtzum, even though this may not be for children, but let's speak about it in simple terms. The tzimtzum addition, even though it was so-called Eifen Shel Siluk, Stalkus, Siluk. Stalkus, complete concealment. Not b'derech miut, as Chassidus says. B'derech Siluk. Miut is a diminished light. A light that comes through, that shines through an opaque curtain, or some other limited flow. Siluk is complete concealment. Yet, at the same time, number one, we say b'shvil hagili, it's before the gili. Number two, we say there's a shimu that remains, an impression, a type of residue that remains, even when there's the complete tzimtzum. And number three, the tzimtzum itself is hein gvureisav, as he says in the Shayich Vumna. It's God's power. But it's a power that's expressed through concealment. So we have to learn to explain this to our children. There are times you can explain to them when daddy, tati and mommy may not be home. Let me have your babysitter. That doesn't mean that you don't have us as parents. It means we have to go somewhere. And right now, someone else is taking care of you as a shliach of ours. Or you yourself staying home if you're of that age. That doesn't mean you don't have your parents. You have to find ways to explain to children how a Rebbe can go through a stage, again, without necessarily explaining why, but a stage where you may not see him completely or at all, but his presence is there. It may be harder to find. And now our job, our responsibility is how to discover him. Like the Moshiach Chassidus of the father that hides from the child, in order to elicit the ingenuity of the child to find the father. So we need to explain it that way to our children. And how do you connect without seeing him? You connect through his directives. Because let's be honest, even when we saw the Rebbe, the connection to the Rebbe was not through our eyes. That was just the easy part. The connection was through his teachings. You learn what the Rebbe learns. You learn what the Rebbe's directives are. You go out and act on them, and that's what we need to do. And no question that if parents are sincere and feel this themselves, that dvarim hayetzim min halev, words from the heart, enter the heart. And in many ways, the responsibility is greater today. We can tell our children our responsibility is to be that moon, is to be that reflection. Because if not, the sun is not shining directly on its own. It needs us, kavyachol, so to speak. Okay. The question that I read before, if God forbid Moshiach doesn't come soon, how are we to understand the Rebbe's words? Well, first of all, we don't speak that language if Moshiach doesn't come soon. We say taka, God forbid. The Rebbe said a number of times, and Moshiach didn't come, why taka not? After we said it's already at the threshold, and otot, and higiyaz mangulaschim, etc. All you have to do is open our eyes. The Rebbe said, echab taka kasha. So how are we to understand the Rebbe's words? Yeah, maybe you don't understand the Rebbe's words. No, bim bam. So what? There's a lot of things we don't understand. We'd love to understand them. We'd love to be able to say, Deira Shvi, here it happens, here's the Beis HaMikdash Shlishi, the Rebbe leads us into the Gula. But clearly, things are somewhat gone through some concealment, as I said before. So what's our approach? Explain that. You have to figure out how to explain it. I don't think the burden of proof lies on the Rebbe or on God. The burden of proof lies on ourselves of what we're supposed to be doing. That's how we have to look at this situation. And I know it's a lot easier to just dump it on the Rebbe and say, what did the Rebbe say and what did he mean, and so on and so forth. But remember, if people Chassidim were ready to give life and death, the Rebbe told people not to do an operation when doctors said to do one, or vice versa, people put themselves at risk in life and death. You could say the Rebbe is not a doctor. All the doctors are saying one thing, the Rebbe is saying another. So why not trust the Rebbe in the same way in these matters that are these issues? Why are we trying to impose our questions and questioning how do you understand the Rebbe's words? You know something? Taka kasha, and it doesn't change the fact that Mashiach can come any second. Anyone thinks about it, Seichel knows that the question is coming from our weakness. Now I'm ready to acknowledge we're all weak. I've got my weaknesses too. But let's not make our weaknesses the standard of what we should be expecting of ourselves. As I mentioned many times, the Rebbe says, we all have flaws, but don't make a philosophy out of your flaws. The philosophy is said by the Chassidus, by Teira, by the Eibishter. We, as flawed human beings, are trying to live up to this standard. What do you want? The standard should be lowered because we're low? That would be a tragedy. That God should say, you know what? I'm going to change the Teira, God forbid, The Rebbe will say, I'll lower my standards. Why? Because people are weak. That's not the approach. The approach is, these are the standards, my friends. And these are the expectations. And you know something? You have the power to achieve it. The fact that we have moments of weaknesses, that's life. Don't make the weakness the barometer. We say, Gimmel Tammuz, connect the same way. But you know something? This is where the distinguishes men from the boys, or women from the girls. Our father, the Rebbe Begoli, is not here right now. How are you going to behave? When a light is shining, you don't see the cracks in the walls. When the light dims in the nighttime, when the moon is what you see, you suddenly see cracks. Our cracks are exposed far more now than they were then. Because the Rebbe's Simchas Torah, Yom Kippur, the Giluyim, they masked over, let's be honest. The Rebbe carried us on his wings. Now, my friends, comes the question, what are you going to do when Kavyochel, in a revealed way, the Rebbe is not physically forcing you to dance? What are you going to do? You're going to dance, you're going to go to sleep. Now, 20 years, it's a tragedy. The tragedy is not just the Gimmel, the tragedy is what have we done? I'm not worried about the Rebbe. I'm not worried about God. I'm worried about ourselves. We were given a mandate. The Rebbe said clearly, I've done everything, now you have to do something. So to say, I don't know what to do, or I don't know what the Rebbe means, is not a mature answer. We have to gather our strengths, put our heads together, and figure it out, just like we figure out how to run our businesses when there's setbacks and bankruptcies and failures. We have to do the same thing here. And it's intolerable that we should allow 20 years. And I say it to myself as to you. So to pose questions is very nice, but it also has a tinge of an excuse. We're not looking for excuses. That would be ridiculous. A Rebbe, such a great Rebbe, such a son that gave us power. So yes, we are moons only as a result of the sunlight, but we have to do our part. And that's the way we have to look at things. So these questions are all, I read them, even though I'm answering them in a way that we shouldn't be asking them, but I understand why we ask them, but we have to address it. We have to address that we have to forge ahead, and we have the powers to do so. How long does the seventh generation Deir HaShvi last? Okay. It's a very nice question. The Rebbe said, let's start what Deir HaShvi is, the seventh generation. In the Maimer Bas Lagani, as I mentioned earlier, the Rebbe says that by Tulda, by birth, not by choice. The Frierdiker Rebbe was the sixth generation, the Alter Rebbe was the first of Chabad. So the Rebbe is the seventh generation. This is a mathematical reality, not based on anything else. That's what the Rebbe says. So the question is now, the Rebbe says it's going to come in Deir HaShvi. So people ask, how long is this Deir HaShvi going to last? My friends, I don't have an answer to this question. To me, the Deir HaShvi lasts as long as the Rebbe lasts, which means it's in our hands. I would say the answer is, it's up to us. If we continue to preserve and continue to march forward with the Rebbe's strength as the Rebbe's moons to the moons to the Rebbe's sunlight, then the Deir HaShvi lasts. If we don't, God forbid, we have the power to stop it. Now the Deir HaShvi, Moshiach comes right now. I don't want to create plans of what will be and what are we going to say to our grandchildren. It's not the way we think. It's like we're really thinking ahead. You want to think ahead, prepare the world for Moshiach. That's how you should think ahead. Not think ahead, a contingency plan, what's plan B in case it doesn't happen. Now again, we all succumb to such thoughts. So have I, and so do I. But I also understand immediately that's not the way we were trained to think. That's just because human beings think that way. We think, okay, plan A doesn't work, what's going to be plan B? But as they say, plan B is plan A. The Rebbe never gave us a plan B. He said Mashiach is coming. God never gave us a plan B. God didn't say, hey, you know something? You mess up to a point, Mashiach doesn't come, God forbid. Mashiach will never come, God forbid. We have to live by the words that were given to us, and most importantly, have the total confidence that Yifutza Meinesecha Chutza is possible to bring to the entire world. Now, if you told me that every person on earth knows what Chassidus is, and then you say, you know what? So then what? What does Mashiach want? What does the Rebbe want? That would be a nice question, good Fabrengen. 7 billion people on earth are learning Chassidus, and they see its value, and we're still living in Golus. That would be a tremendous question. But we all understand, if that was the case, it wouldn't be Golus. So if that's not the case, my friends, and I say this to myself as well, what right do we have to say, where is the Gula, and how Deir HaShvi? What have we done? 7 billion people on this planet Now, do we have to reach every single one? No, there's a thing called a critical mass. You reach 20%, you're in good shape. We haven't reached 20% either. And I'm not saying this to beat ourselves up. I'm saying it to be realistic. So there's plenty to do. So someone say, well, how can we reach the large world? Well, my friends, I'm sure everybody here simply watching this has internet, has technology, whether you consider it to be a positive or negative, but you use it. And why did God create it? As the Rebbe says, Mishpatim Tovshim Dalet, He put a koyach adir, an enormous power into nature, for one reason, to bring Yiddishkeit, the lukus and godliness, and Chassidus to the entire world. Just like He created gold for the Beis HaMikdash, and because of free will allows us to use gold for other reasons. Same thing with technology. The fact that everyone on earth is using technology for selfish purposes, for entertainment, for narishkeiten, still doesn't take away. V'chim mipnei hashetim, because of the fools of the world, God is going to destroy the world. You all know the Tosfos Yontiv asked the question on that if that's the case, the philosopher should ask Rabbi Akiva the next question. Why doesn't God destroy the fools? You know, the point there is that he said He should destroy the sun and the moon so there wouldn't be idolatry. So he answered, the Tan answered, because of the fools, God's going to destroy the world. So the Tosfos Yontiv says, so He should have destroyed the fools. And the answer, of course, is He's not going to take away bchira, free will. So the fact that everybody on earth, or almost everybody, is using gold, and this koyach adir, this enormous power for their own things, doesn't take away why it was from the purpose it was created. Bereshis b'shvil Yisrael, b'shvil haTorah. It's our obligation to do something about it. And each of us has that power. The Rebbe didn't create a hierarchy and say, listen, go to this one, go to that one. This one is the leader. The Rebbe said, each of us in our own way, in your own world, you could reveal and discover and identify godliness. So, let's go to a few other questions. If the Rebbe was frustrated, the Moshiach not coming, how can we possibly bring him? My children too are confused. I keep on telling the Moshiach is coming, he just doesn't come. Okay. I am a regular bacher, and what's bothering me, my friends, is the fact that we're all very confused about the whole idea of Moshiach. Should we focus on the fact that Rebbe could be Moshiach or not, and just in general what we're meant to be doing? And I think because of all the politics, we just don't focus on any of it. Well said. And then finally, is there more I can do to hasten the coming of Moshiach? I follow all the Rebbe's directives, daven, goyim, mivtzoyim. What else can I do? Okay. Well, as always, we are not just looking back at what we've done. I'm sure everybody's doing great things. Parents are sacrificing their lives to bring up their children, Chassidic children, with Yiras Shamayim and so on. We always have to think of what we haven't done. That's the whole objective here. You know, what we haven't done. And I reiterate what I said earlier, that there are plenty of people and there are plenty of methods we have not used. Frankly, you know, we were trained that the best defense is offense. To try to start explaining to ourselves or to our children why this happened, why that happened, and the issues that are all the so-called the negatives, doesn't really get us very far. You'll always see people accomplish most when they are motivated to take the initiative. We have to begin thinking, forward thinking proactively of what are we going to do. We can't talk to our children and to ourselves in a way, what are we going to do? In the sense of what's going to be. We have to think of what are we going to do in a forward-thinking way. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that at the end of the Masechta Seder, where it talks about the negative signs of Mashiach, the days before Mashiach, so he talks about chutzpah and the other different signs, negative signs. Then he says, "Ve'ein lanu li'ishan el al Avinu shebashamayim," and we have no one to lean on but our Father in heaven. So most people read it as being, after the Gemara speaks all the negative, Messiah b'tev, you conclude with something positive by saying, it'll be so bad, but we will have nothing to lean on but Hashem. Friedrich Rebbe says that too is a siman of Ikvus and Moshiach, where people will say, I can't do anything. I have nothing to lean on but Hashem. That too is a negative, because we were given the ability, we were blessed to be in this generation. And I don't know how to say it in better terms than what I'll say right now. Unfortunately, I can continue to hear it. It not goes against the Rebbe's personality, his essence, everything he taught us. This negative approach of I did everything, and what else can I do? Or some other type of whining or resignation. And I'm not trying to be critical of anyone. I understand where it's coming from, but it's not the Rebbe's approach. You are in a war. You're a soldier. You can't sit down and suddenly start whining and hiding and saying, what am I supposed to do? We were given marching orders. We were told to march forward. We were told we have all the power to do so. There's no excuse for us not to put our heads together. You don't have an answer, find a mashpia. You can't find one mashpia, find a different one. Find someone that has something positive to say to you and say, yes, you know what you can do? I was this past Shabbos for bringing with some bochrim, and one of them is a computer programmer. He's doing programming for some company, making his money. But he has a Chassidic bindle and he's very warm to it. And I said to him, let me ask you something. Do you use any of your programming experience and knowledge toward your futzimai nesachah chutza? He says, give me an example. I said, what do you mean? Example, very simple. We have all the tools, we have the pipelines. And he said to me, I said to him, do me a favor, not for me, for you. Commit to do something in the area of your futzimai nesachah chutza, using your technology expertise and knowledge to spread Chassidus. There's many ways to do it. You can create beautiful little vignettes, use social media, YouTube, and so on and so forth. Is everyone out there listening to this? Every one of us has a skill. If not one, many. Where are those skills being used? Often it's to make money, it's to be resourceful, take care of yourself and your family's needs. That's all nice. It could be all het and mutter. But it's not the mission that Rebbe gave us. That is still limited. The mission is to use it for some forward thinking. We have to think like business people. Business people means we have to think in terms that we are driven to succeed. The Rebbe would often say, Asik b'teira. Teirase o menase. What's the word asik? Asik means like business. Menase is a job. It's not a 9-to-5 job we're on. When it's 24/7, your job, your business rather, then wherever you go, whoever you meet, it's an opportunity. Now I know we are trained to think materialistically, we're trained to think money, and we don't think ruchnius in the same way. But that's what the Rebbe trained us to be, spiritual soldiers. That everywhere you go, you look for an opportunity. Two vignettes to capture this idea, and the challenge now is to apply that each in our own lives. One, I saw it recently in a letter, but I used it, actually I was kavanti to the Rebbe's approach. I once was speaking for a conference of doctors, and they asked me to speak about medicine of the future. So I spoke. What the Rambam says, there'll be no illness, there'll be no death, no disease. So of course one doctor, and I explained what that means, because the healing will take place, there'll be an alignment between body and soul. One doctor got up and said, so what will we do as doctors then? If there will be no more healing of illness and disease and death? So after the prerequisite joke that maybe that's why doctors charge so much to save for a long retirement, I said, look, you doctors have intimate knowledge of the secrets that God implanted in the human physiology, anatomy, neurology, circulation, the whole body. From my flesh I behold God. Our flesh is b'tselem elikim, not just our souls. So you'll teach us the secrets, the esoteric and mystical and even practical secrets of God through studying the image of God. And the same thing will be scientists in their way. Actually, just not to toot my horn, I got a standing ovation for that one. And I said, what better way to use your time instead of fighting the pain of illness, disease, and families broken as a result, and death? You'll be leaders in teaching us the mysteries of God's secrets in existence and beyond. I saw recently in a letter a similar thing the Rebbe writes, similar. I must have gotten it from the Rebbe, but I didn't remember it. And the Rebbe says, the doctor about Moshiach, that what better doing is to be involved in preventive medicine. Obviously, the Rebbe didn't mean preventive because there won't be illness, but preventive in the sense of being the healthiest you can be and understanding the divine within it. The second anecdote I'd like to share is from a letter from the Rebbe, which I may have mentioned. If I did, so be it. It's worthwhile mentioning again. It's a letter to a laundromat. I mentioned it because it can't be more mundane than that. What will happen to a laundromat when Moshiach comes? So the Rebbe doesn't address that directly, but you'll see from the answer of the Rebbe. If you could see it in a laundromat, you could see it in any area of life. This is how we have to be trained to think. So here's how it works. The Rebbe writes to the laundromat that everything is divine providence, and as such, when you're working in laundry, there has to be a lesson in serving God. The Rebbe writes, here's the lesson. What's the kunst, the chiddush, the innovation of laundry? It's like this. You buy new clothing, new garments, you dress, and then, of course, you wear it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, it gets soiled, wrinkled, dirtied, sullied, etc. So you'd think at some point you got to throw it out. I know some people hold on as long as they can, but at some point, if you're somewhat of a mensch, you can't keep on wearing that. Comes laundry and says, no. You give it to a laundromat. I don't know if the Rebbe is talking about dry cleaners there or wet cleaners, I don't know, or Chinese cleaners, but it doesn't matter. And what does the laundry do? The laundromat takes the garment. They submerge it in water, not just water, warm water. Mix it with chemicals that get rid of the stains and the smudges, etc., the grease. Then afterwards, dry it, press it under a heavy press, and voila, you have a new garment. And you can go through this process many times in the lifetime of a garment. It's fresh like new. What's the lesson? The soul you have given us is pure, like a fresh garment. But then life wrinkles each of us. Life hurts us. We get wounded, we get disappointed. Different things happen to us. So the garment, the neshama, can seem to get soiled, wrinkled, dirtied, etc. Comes laundry and says like this. Take the neshama and submerge it in water. Ein mayim ela teira. Water is teira. Das Hashem, Mola Arz Deis Hashem, Kamayim Layam Mechas. Teira. Then not just teira, but warm teira. Not kaltkeit, but varmkeit, with chmimus, with a passion, with a warmth. You mix in chemicals, as each chemical is a different mitzvah. The mezuzah, tefillin, kashrus, so on. The mitzvahs take care of the smudges and the soils and so on. Then afterwards you put it under a heavy press, Kabbalas El. Kabbalas El, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. And there you got yourself a neshama shenasata b'tahiri, fresh like new. And you can do this process many times. This is a perfect example. That's the letter. But I'm carrying it over one step. The Rambam says that Moshiach comes, lo yi'esek kol ha'elam el l'dasis Hashem b'lvad. The entire world will be esek, not just philosophers and theologians, everybody. So the question is how? What are you talking about? Not everybody is capable of understanding the mysteries of God's knowledge. My friends. This laundromat, whether he's a masculine chassidus or not, but his laundry is an example that he can teach others of how a soul goes through its metamorphosis, where it can be sullied and it can be renewed. So if you can find it in laundry, you can find it in anything. So our challenge is to think new, to think different, to speak different, to act differently. Because if you think as you thought till now, if you speak what you said till now, if you do what you did till now, you know what you're going to have? What you had, God forbid. We don't want to have what we had the last 20 years. We want a new situation. And remember, the sun does not sets, as the Mittler Rebbe writes, but it does not disappear. It shines through the moon to us. And we are those little moons, each of us. And we have to look at Gimmel Tammuz in that fashion. So in these days, as we approach Gimmel Tammuz, let us resolve to take the bull by the horns, go on the offensive, proactive, and put our questions aside. We have many questions. If you have to deal with them for the little time you need. But above all, take your energy and focus. How am I going to perpetuate the light of the Rebbe in this world? How am I going to share the Rebbe with people? And we have everything we need. We have all the words of the Rebbe, those passionate words, the words infused with the Rebbe's neshama, non nafshik sovis yehavis, the words that are visionary in nature, that are empowering, that address every topic in life, that literally allows us to transform everything from our childhood to our old age. Our joys, our marriages, our love, and also dealing with pain and the sad. Our work, charity, health, you name it. Every area of life, society, the issues of technology, every challenge we have in our world, in our lives, the Rebbe addresses. This is what we need to share. And the Rebbe gave it to us. So I want to again reiterate that we've made this easy. If you go to sharetherebbe.com, you can do this easily by sending a personalized gift of Torah Meaningful Life. Obviously, we can do it in many different ways. And Hashem should bless us, that we shouldn't have to wait for our effort. But as the Rebbe concludes in the Maimer, in Bos Legani, he says, V'niska, Zenzich mit dem Rebbe, we should merit to see the Rebbe, V'hu Yigaleinu, and he will redeem us. Until next week, Sunday, 8 p.m., this has been My Life, Chassidus Applied, Special Rebbe Edition. And please send us your questions, any comments, and we'll continue this topic next week, obviously, and upcoming weeks, but also addressing other questions which ultimately are all part of the Rebbe and Chassidus approach to life. Thank you very much.